Now the time has come to write the next great chapter in the history of our armed forces, to prepare for the next battlefield, where America's best and bravest will be called to deter and defeat a new generation of threats to our people,
yes,
to our nation.
Yes.
The time has come to establish the United States Space Force.
Hallelujah.
His speech was quickly followed by a nod from the president on Twitter, of course. Space Force all the way! Exclamation point. Back
Absolutely.
with you, Jonathan Capehart, opinion writer for the Washington Post. Did you know that we needed a Space Force?
No, I did not. I did not know we needed a Space Force. I know we need to have astronauts, American astronauts, who can get to the International Space Station without the help of the Russians. But I did not know we needed a force in outer space to protect us from what? I have no idea.
What's not clear is how much it's going to cost precisely and who in Congress is backing it. But it did seem odd that the president announced the creation of the Space Force today, or the vice president.
Yes, it is odd. And you raised the right question, Craig. How much is this going to cost? And where is this money going to come from? I'm old enough to remember when Republicans on Capitol Hill used to always fret about debt and deficits and neutral payments. Now those concerns are out the window.
Thank you so much, and thanks for keeping a straight face. I know how difficult that was for you.
You know how difficult that is for me.
That's going to do it for this hour of MSNBC Live. Katie Turris standing by. I'll see you tomorrow morning on Today.
Space Force!
Is that going to be the theme song for it?
Space Force! I don't know, whenever I see it, I think, Space Force! I don't know. Just feels right to me.
Does it?
It does.
That voice of yours, I tell you, that is a...
Oh, it's good.
That's a TV voice.
Can you imagine how lucky my husband is when we drive in the car?
He's lucky.
He's not.
Yeah. Have a good show.
Thanks, Craig. It's 11 a.m. out west and 2 p.m. in the east. And
I want to comment on Space Force real quick. This is a planned out entrepreneur ideal that actually began in the early 80s in Ronald Reagan's administration. And for some reason, I don't know if it was too costly. I don't know if the technology just wasn't there. But for some reason, the ideology in behind what Ronald Reagan had planned pertaining to Star Wars, I think is the wording that he used at the time. He didn't use Space Force. The ideology was there, understanding the dangers that not only the Americans was going to have to occur pertaining to enemies at large, not only in the cyber world, but also in the space world. Ronald Reagan understood these things. And it was avoided. It was kicked out. And for some reason, this whole concept of the falling of the Berlin Wall since 1988, I'm going to put the blame up onto the ignorant and the narrow-minded, and as well as in the spiritual world, Satan. But for some reason, we have been stifled to the point that there has been no growth here in America on account of various people with their narrow-minded thinking. They obviously thought that that was too adventurous, too costly, too this, too that, whatever. But the thing about it is, whenever you get to looking at the Bible, if you believe in the apocalypse that it speaks of in Revelations, it talks about how that God himself will turn upon humanity in the last days pertaining to the great white throne judgment. And he's basically going to chunk rocks up onto this planet towards bringing misery to humanity because of their unwillingness to be obedient to him. And some may say, well, that sounds to me like a very, very cruel, mean God to me. Well, our understanding whenever it comes to discipline, action, has been tainted, to say the least, for the past 25, 30 years. Up until 25, 30 years ago, it was very, very notorious, not only here in America, but throughout the world, that the way that you taught your children is that you brought some sort of physical pain, regardless whether it was pain by slapping or pain by paddling or pain by pulling their ear or pulling their hair or doing something to that degree. It was a prominent thing, because that's the way animals, if you look at lions, tigers, deer, rabbits, horses, cows, whenever they get out of place, sometimes they get pretty brutal with their youngsters. They get pretty intense towards discipline actions. And for us to go from an abusive society, back whenever I was growing up in this part of the neck of the woods, I'm sure it wasn't that way out west, because out west and in other areas they was advanced at least 25, 30 years in comparison to where they are around here. But whenever I was growing up, we got the heck torn out of our rear ends whenever we done something incorrect or wrong. And even the Bible talks about sparing the rod, spoiling the child. That if you spare the rod, you'll spoil the child. This is a technique that has been passed down from generation to generation to generation, going all the way back to the Judeo law, pertaining to the law of Moses, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This is the way that humanity maintained order. And now, 30 years later, it's to the point here in America. I know it's not this way over in other parts of the world, but over here in America, you can't even talk loud to a child or get abrupt with them in any form or fashion, much less get physical with them. And we have done a 180-degree turn the wrong way whenever it comes to discipline. And it's really sad. It's really, really sad. I want to hear what this guy here's got to say, because he's, by and large, on top of his game pertaining to the unjustfulness.
Country, 35% of the country, they have surrendered their intellectual sovereignty to Donald Trump. Things that are clearly true, that are before them, that can be known. Objective facts, objective truth. What Trump has been able to do, abetted by Rudy Giuliani, abetted by Devin Nunes, is this: to redefine truth as what the leader says is truth, what the leader believes is true. And it doesn't matter if the leader is saying the red chair is blue, the blue chair is red, up is down, or down is up. And of course, that is not just pernicious, it's profoundly dangerous in a democracy, and there is no other democratic republic in the world where you see that.
All right, I want to weigh in right here real quick. Most of the time, the things that he talks about are logical and practical, and I go along with. But this continually gouging the president, our chief and commander, unless he has done something really, really horribly bad, either with laws or with practices, either or. To me, this is my ideology, of democracy. To me, it's just like I don't know if it would be called a cliche or just a memento that the sailors used to use, which is loose lips sink ships. Whenever you get to looking at a mutiny that was created in heaven, whenever there was one particular angel that is no longer an angel, but now is a fallen spirit by the name of Lucifer. Somebody created that wink link. And in that wink link, a third of the angels followed with the one that spearheaded that. It was a defining moment of one particular spirit that has now turned into the Antichrist that started the mutiny up in heaven, and that's where the war began. So there are severe I'm trying to think of the right word. There are severe ramifications whenever you have a society that wants to pick and poke and poke and pick and pick and poke and poke and pick and pick and poke and poke and pick at its chief and commander, because what it does, it weakens the unification of the party, is what it does. And you do have to admit that whenever we was established under what pretense? I think a Republican, correct? A Republican. And it wasn't until years later, whenever they decided to bring in another party, a Democrat Party, in which there's nothing wrong with the Democrat Party, per se, as long as what they're talking about is just, and as long as it's real. But whenever you go to make believing, pulling things out of the hat, trying to brainwash society in making them believe things that isn't so, unless there is absolute 100% clear evidence that that man right there done something extraordinarily wrong, either with policy or with the law, towards what he was either practicing or what he was doing, unless he has done something extremely obvious to the point of being red-handed, I think that these people that continually bash are in a way forming a mutiny. And in this mutiny, it creates a wink link. In this wink link, it damages the rest of the chain. Because a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And if you continue to have a weak link, you're going to continue to have a weak democracy. You're going to have a weak party. You're going to have a weak Republican. You're going to have a weak nation. And to me, whenever it comes to this type of approach, I understand that communism should be tromped out and should be abolished from the planet of the earth. But at the same time, I understand in this form of democracy that we, as an American society, uphold and practice, has taken it too far. It's kind of like with spanking of the children. Whenever you take whenever you take the decency of being able to discipline your children, and I'm not talking about beating, and I'm not talking about psychologically damage a little girl or a little boy, but what I'm talking about is discipline out of love. My father used to teach us this, but he didn't never practice it. Oh, this is going to hurt me a whole lot worse than it's going to hurt you, right before he flew in on top of us. You know, if you have that esteem at heart, and if that is your true motive in behind discipline little Johnny or disciplining little Sally, I don't see nothing in the world wrong with it, because it is the fundamental concept of how that we are to teach one another of rights and wrongs. Some of us has hard-headed ways, and some of us has to be taught the lesson more than once. What do they say on Facebook? Lesson will be repeated until learned. Well, that's what God is trying to do to humanity right now, and that's the reason why all these calamities continue to keep falling upon to us, is because we have not learnt the lesson yet pertaining to what God wants to do to the Homo sapiens upon this planet. And until we do learn that, listen to me carefully, until we do learn that, we can expect more hardship to fall in the areas of disease, pestilences, droughts, floods, famines, hurricanes, earthquakes, solar flares, meteor bombardments, and other type of calamities that will fall upon to humanity that will cause destruction in our fundamental ways of life. In other words, you can be as far to the far right, that is wrong, with communism, as you can be too far to the left with freedom of speech, that is damaging to, once more, the republic. It's damaging to the party. It's damaging to the whole chain. It's weakening the chain. If these commentaries that get on TV and radio that Donald Trump talks about pertaining to fake news, and I understand a lot of it's got to do with one's perspective of how that he or she is looking at it. In other words, it's not what you're looking at, but how that you're looking at it. It's kind of like the glass of water. It's either half full or half empty. I understand that. I really do. I understand that concept pertaining to one's perspective. But we must learn that these are the tricks and the traits of Satan that the Bible talks about, that is out to steal, kill, and destroy. And the Bible also says that he is the author of confusion. And whenever you have a society over here in America that is so divided and so separated, like we are right now, for surely to God, you don't have to be all that intelligent to understand this has become, our democracy over here has become more damaging than it has become productive. It's become a non-productive, getting on TV, cutting, slashing, backbiting, bringing up these issues that really and truly should be resolved in a different way. Kind of like the Stormy Daniels deal with Donald Trump being president. That should be handled in a different area, in a different way. Really, for it to even be in the eyes of the general public is debatable, because those occurrences happened in his life before Donald Trump became a president, before he became a politician. Now, if he had done something during the time that he was president towards the Stormy Daniels deal, yes, put it on open national TV, put it on every TV station and every news column that you can think of, kind of like Bill Clinton. What happened with Bill Clinton was on our dime. What happened with Donald Trump was on his own dime, pertaining to his moral imbalances that he practiced way before he ever throwed his hat into the arena towards becoming president. Once more, you got to be able to rightly divide the do's and the don'ts, the pros and the cons. And that's where the trickery of Satan is coming in, towards trying to bring destruction and diminish the quality of our life because of our laws. In other words, Satan is trying to take our Constitution and manipulate them, and instead of it being in our favor, he's trying to turn it to our disfavor, to a discord. And that's not what our forefathers had intended whenever they sat down and they wrote the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and other type of bills that we are to rule our lives off of here in America. Some of the things that we discuss need to be discussed. Some of the things that are out in the open, as far as I am concerned, is nothing more than a sham. It brings a mockery, not so much to the person, but to the position that the person holds. And whenever you have that going on, that becomes very, very destructive to a democracy that we uphold and that we live by on a day-to-day basis. Once more, it's similar to the discipline of our children. We have went from one perspective of beating them until you leave just a little bit of breath in them will be okay, to the point now we can't even hardly look at them without some truant officer coming to our door and thinking that we're going to go to jail, even though the Bible says that if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. We have went from one side of the perspective to the other side of the perspective, and it's no balance there. And we're doing the same thing with our democracy. And this is what is causing so much confusion and so much destruction in our way of life. And whenever this occurs, one must look deeper into the heart of the intent of what is really happening here. What is really going on here? Who has caused this? Why is this being done this way? You got to go through, the who, the what, the when, and the why, and it all leads back to the spirituality of the mind, body, and soul of man, pertaining to the demonic underground world that is doing this to us. And if we're not intelligent enough to figure this out, Satan is going to have his way. And the next thing you know, we'll all be suffering the consequences on account of it. Once more, good luck to all of us. Thanks for listening to me. Thanks for listening to some of the things that the Windmill Ministries Missions has to put on our Facebook, our YouTube channels, towards trying to bring awareness to the general public. It is time for the awakening of not only the American people, but the world, pertaining to what has went on here. 30 years of backlash. We have been set back 30 years because of various politicians that did not understand the concept of what Ronald Reagan was trying to talk about in regard to Space Force, in regard to Star Wars, in regard to the very thing that I have on my truck right now, which is comment, or the other word that I got on the other side of my truck is combat, comment, warrior. Combat, comment, warrior. We are not just dealing with things pertaining to the devices that we hold in our hands and pertaining to cyberspace, but we're also dealing with other elements out there that could very well be our Achilles heel to the Homo sapiens upon this planet. And these are the things that Ronald Reagan was trying to warn the American people as well as the world about, and it got shoved off into a back corner. Got put aside. I don't know what the Homo sapiens was thinking, but I hope it's not too late for us to regroup, and I hope it's not too late for us to understand that these indifferences that we have, in some incidences, it's okay to bring them up on a national level, but in other incidences, they need to be compartmentalized and they need to be dealt with in other ways and in other areas rather than to bring disgrace to, once more, the Republic.